Hey, welcome back to On the Level Leadership. And this week I want to talk about the absentee leader and how ineffective that form of leadership can be. Hey, welcome back this week. So, what is an absentee leader? An absentee leader is one that is detached from their teams. These are leaders that can seem very aloof, very distant, very removed. They don't really interact very much with their teams. They can be what's considered laissez-faire, which is loosely translated to letting them do what they want or a little too easygoing. They often avoid meetings, will delegate meetings to other managers to go on their behalf. They don't have conversations that are appreciative in manner with their staff. They don't appreciate any kind of successes that may occur even with their poor leadership. And they typically will generalize and say, you all are doing such a great job, because they really don't have a relationship with people to be able to offer up individualized perspectives. The Harvard Business Review describes the absentee leader, and I'm going to quote here, as people in leadership roles who are psychologically absent from their teams. Psychologically absent. Like, let that sit for a minute. So these kinds of leaders can be in an organization for years and go kind of unrecognized as absentee slash dysfunctional leaders, because they tend to be a little quieter, a little remote. They don't tend to, rock the boat or say a lot of really loud, obnoxious things. And the more abusive leaders in an organization typically will take priority because they're louder, or they're narcissistic, or they're more abusive, or there's complaints against them. Whereas the absentee leader maybe is a little more quiet and sort of can really truly fly under the radar. So these leaders are people who like the trappings of leadership. They like the position, they like the title, they like the closed office, the window seat that they have, but they don't like actually managing people. They don't care about people. The people is like inconsequential to their leadership. They really don't want any part of that. And it might not even be that they don't like people. They just don't like managing people or the problems that come along with managing human beings. According to the Harvard Business Review, this is the worst kind of leadership because it's insidious, because it's underlaid, and because it's not so obvious, right? At first, these leaders can really look like they're phenomenal leaders, because you're like, oh man, like I can go to lunch and nobody's like timing me, and I can show up whenever. And, he doesn't really care if I come or go at whatever time, and so on. But the flip side of that is that there's a lack of leadership, a lack of oversight. So therefore, a lack of direction, a lack of team cohesion, a lack of vision. And research shows that the impact of these leaders on organizations can be long lasting. In fact, the negative impacts on employees and on morale can be 2 and 3 and 4 years beyond that leader's disappearance, because they have such an impact on the morale of people that it can take up to 2 years for an organization to recover beyond an absent leader. They really just aren't there to steer the strategic or the operational steps or direction of a team. So what happens when you don't have a leader? Well, much like in the animal world, if you don't have a leader, what's going to happen is somebody in the pack is going to assume that leadership. And unfortunately, that's not always the best person for the job. You'll have people within a team, for example, that will participate in things like bullying behavior because they want to assert themselves as the next leader in a circumstance or in a situation, when in fact they're not. And it could be somebody who's multi-layers down below that particular leader, but yet you'll have a person step up and say, no, I'm going to assume leadership. And sometimes it's not even something that's overt. It's not like I'm going to take leadership or I'm going to take the reins. It's more of an individual just on a subconscious level deciding, you know what, no one's taking the reins here, so I'm going to do it for us, because if no one else does, I'm going to do it. So employees will start to get a bit stressed out about their roles within the organization. So they'll think things like, well, if our leader isn't there and supporting and directing and providing vision and ensuring that our value add is understood at the senior tables, then what happens when there's cuts or when dollars have to go out the window? Well, our team's going to be first to be cut because nobody knows what we do around here. So staff will start to become very insecure, and you'll have high rotation, high turnover rates, lots of dissatisfaction. You'll have a lot of underperforming folks that just like don't care. They just give up because who cares? Nobody's leading us anyway, so nobody gives a crap. So why bother? So what exactly causes an absentee leader? This is a really good question because I don't think that all people or leaders that are absentee in nature necessarily started in that way. They may have become an absentee leader for a variety of reasons, good or bad. And some of the reasons that might explain someone who becomes an absentee leader are things like having a crisis happen at home. So, for example, if your marriage is falling apart, then obviously you're going to be distracted and maybe not so involved in the day-to-day work life, right? Your priorities change when you have crises at home, or maybe somebody's sick. And because of that, you might be a little bit more remote or distant from your workplace. It could be, a substance abuse or a mental health disorder. So all of a sudden, the person is suffering from some sort of depression, for example. Again, it could be related to an event or crisis at home that leads to depression or substance use, which makes them more absentee. So if somebody is drinking a lot, their focus is on the next fix, not on their team's success, right? And it's the same thing with mental health challenges. When you have depression, and I speak from experience on this because I've had depression in my 20s and early 30s, it is really hard to focus on success or focus on others when you yourself are struggling to just get through day to day. The other situation is a person might just have always been that way. So you have a staffer in your office who has always been remote, has never really been a visionary, has had a hard time keeping the cohesion of a team alive. It could be that they lack confidence, or maybe they're not competent for the role, or they might be both. Maybe they are not competent and they don't have confidence, and so they fly under the radar, they delegate, they avoid meetings, they avoid accountability, they avoid responsibility because they don't know how to handle it because they just don't have the competency levels for that job. It might be that the person loves all of the things that a leadership position gives them, but they're overwhelmed by the level of responsibility and accountability that leadership has to offer. And, being a leader of people means being self-aware. It means being open to ideas. It means checking your ego sometimes. And, if you're really struggling to do that and you're very overwhelmed by the amount of work and responsibility that is falling on your shoulders, then you might become an absentee leader as a defense mechanism almost of trying to hide underneath all that. Have maybe you have imposter syndrome, right? And this is something that's really affecting you. And so you kind of hide from your employees so you don't have to deal with the responsibilities that goes along with your position. A leader might just not care. They may be narcissistic in nature. There are people out there who are lazy and don't want to work hard for what they are earning and just they want the $200,000 salary. They want to drive the BMW. They want to live in the big house, but they don't want to deal with people and they most certainly don't want to work very hard. So that does happen. More often than not, people tend to look for the easy way out of things. And so you can end up with an absentee leader because of that. And to give you an example from a personal perspective, I'm personally in transition right now. I'm transitioning between my job, which I will be leaving in December, to full-time entrepreneurship. So if I was not careful, I would probably become an absentee leader as I disconnect from one role to engage in another. It's very easy to do, actually. And it's not because I'm overwhelmed, and it's not because I'm lazy, and it's not because I lack competence or confidence. It's because I don't have a lot of time. I'm exhausted from having 2 hats on my head right now. I have a family with 3 kids. I have, a bathroom I had to redo and, life that gets in the way. And so with all of these various competing activities, competing for my energy and for my, inputs, what happens is that a part of you kind of goes, well, okay, something's got to give. And that something oftentimes is work. So someone who is like overtaxed in their life or is in a transitional mode of thinking, kind of going from to, then it's possible that a person could become an absentee leader. I'm really cautious about that myself. I've been very self-aware of how I'm presenting in meetings and that I'm not checking out too soon, that I'm performing my duties and that I'm supporting my staff, even though I'm transitioning out of that role. And I know that in 3 months' time, I will no longer be an employee of the government of Canada, for example, but that's okay because I need to understand that right now this is my role and I'm going to continue to be a leader in that role, but it's not always easy, especially when you're trying to move from one place to another. So transition can cause you to become absentee. So what can be done about it? Well, if you're managing a leader who exhibits these signs, you can offer coaching to them. Coaching is a way to help people build their skills of engagement, to learn what comes naturally and what they need to work on. You can do assessments through this coaching where people learn what leadership skills are they really strong at and which ones do they need to grow in. And I think that is something that can really be offered to those employees, not as a reprimand necessarily or as a performance management thing, because coaching really should never really be used as a performance measurement or management thing. It should be really about helping somebody become more successful in their role. So really the focus has to be on a positive note, not so much a negative one, but you can certainly offer coaching as an opportunity for them to help improve their skills. You can reassign them. I mean, ultimately, some people are just better doers than they are leaders, and that's absolutely okay. So having that performance conversation with your staff or with your manager that says, you're a really great content developer and you're a really great programmer, but you're not so great with people, right? And, I really think it might be best for you to go off and be a programmer and not necessarily deal with the interpersonal demands that being a manager really forces you to do. Because some people just don't enjoy being in leadership positions. There may be a way to make them special advisors in some way to the CEO, for example, where their technical expertise is really drawn upon and leveraged for that company, but then they're not necessarily having a big staff of people reporting into them. So be open to the possibility that they may just not care. And they may be indifferent or passive and not want to do anything to improve their skills. And if that's the case, then you're going to have to make your own conclusions as a manager, and it might mean letting them go. You need to have these conversations with people, give them a humane chance to kind of pick up their bootstraps, so to speak, but it's entirely possible that you may end up having to terminate an employee who's not performing from a people management perspective, or if there isn't a way to reallocate them somewhere else in the organization where they might be better suited. So some tips on how to deal with an absentee leader if you happen to be reporting to one are kind of as follows. You can be the squeaky wheel. I mean, if you are loud enough and annoying enough, they have no choice but to address your needs. So in theory, I guess you could be squeaky. Continue to bring issues to their attention, continue to seek their feedback about things, give them reports, make noise, like continually fill their inbox with things, because ultimately they can't ignore you if you continue to provide them content. The other thing is to get personal, get to know them, get to know their families, their hobbies, get to know their birthdays, their children's birthdays. And the reason for that is it's a little bit of a manipulative tactic, mind you, but it's really about befriending them in a way, because an absentee leader will pay more attention to the ones that they care about. So if it's somebody, especially if it's an absentee leader who doesn't care about anybody, if they develop a personal relationship with you, suddenly they're going to be more interested in what you have to say to them, advice you might have, etc. So try to make a connection so that you can make your work life a little bit better. You can talk to other leaders in the organization, maybe even do a bit of a networking piece, see if other leaders in the organization recognize who you are and what your talent is. Then you may want to consider maybe going to a different part of the organization if there's an opportunity for you based on the fact that they recognize your talent. You could place a complaint against the leader, although I do say that most people would not do that because complaints to HR often become career limiting for people. And I know that I'm very pro don't take crap from anybody. That's just who I am. But at the end of the day, I also recognize it's very hard for people to, complain against a leader in an organization that's positionally much higher than them, because it really puts them in a space of vulnerability that they could be fired, they could be demoted, they could be moved somewhere where they're really not going to be happy. So you could complain to HR. It's an option. But I understand that might not be an option for you. Last but not least, you can leave. You can start looking for another organization to work for, develop the business you've been thinking about developing for the past 3 years or whatever, and really look for a workplace or a leader or a boss or a manager who will actually recognize your talents, acknowledge what you bring to the table, be willing to engage in personal conversations, be willing to have meetings with you on a bilateral basis, on a weekly or biweekly basis, be willing to listen and hear you out when there's issues, to be willing and part of the decision-making process. If you don't have that now where you are, you can certainly look for opportunities elsewhere that will provide you that. So that's this week's Leadership Lowdown installment. I will be doing leadership and coaching installments on a regular basis on this channel. So if this is something that's of interest to you, you can certainly subscribe. I do have my website, you can see right here. So if you want to visit my website, if you're interested in any coaching to help you get through some of these issues, or if you think you're an absentee leader and you want some help to kind of improve your skills, I can certainly help you out there. There's a link down below for a free coaching call. We can just start the coaching conversation, no strings attached. And I really do hope to see you again next week. I'm here every week, so you can subscribe if you like, in order to get more content just like this. Again, I cover leadership and I try to coach you on this channel. So anyway, thanks again for watching this week's installment of On the Level Leadership. I hope to see you next week. Take care. Bye.